Hey, this is Dr. Traci Harrell, and I could not be more excited. We are here with Dr. Caprice Hollins, who wrote an amazing book called Inside Out. Inside Out, the Equity Leader's Guide to Undoing Institutional Racism. How are you doing, Caprice?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dr. Harrell.
So the interesting thing about today's session is we're combining a book called Positive Intelligence, which is a coaching series that allows us to truly change the status quo by changing us, right? We get to change, improve our performance, our connections with others, right? Our ability to thrive no matter what's happening around us. That's what positive intelligence allows us to do. So we change ourselves. And what your book is about is changing systems. And my declaration is that we can't change systems unless we're changing ourselves. Tell us about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. That's why I named it Inside Out, right? Because the work really does start with ourselves. And, that what is that cliche saying about being the change that you want to see in others. And so a big portion of the book at least starts out with the personal work that we need to do so that we're leading by modeling, because I
Mm,
see a lot of people in this work that are like we can bring our trauma into this work, our pain and hurt onto other people, really creating a culture that actually runs contrary to what we want to be seeing in our workplaces and society as a whole. So it talks a great deal about that personal work.
I love it. So we're gonna actually share something. Um, it's basically, this image. This is what we pulled together for today, right? It says, "Are you ready to leave a legacy for the next generation?" Join us live to grow beyond the status quo, to grow beyond the status quo. Do you love that?
I love it. I love it. I love being a part of this conversation with you. Mhm.
Growing beyond the status quo is really, part of your why. So many books say we have to start with the why, right?
Mhm.
My why includes truly changing the status quo. That's why I use that title today, because I believe we can be a part of change that leaves a legacy for the next generation. So tell us a little bit about, and I love everything about your book, but tell us a little bit about your why.
Yeah. So the book invites people to explore what's their why for racial equity. And anyone, who experiences racism or is trying to lead racial equity work knows how difficult it is in a society that's still denying that racism even exists. And so if we know what our why is, it can help us to get back in it when we're fatigued, when we don't have the capacity. We can go back to, so why did I start this in the first place? Why am I so committed to racial justice? So for example, I have a personal and a professional why. Professionally, I think about the shoulders that I'm standing on, right? I was just doing a keynote at our church, and Eddie Rye came up to me, and I'm thinking, I'm standing on his shoulders. Janet Jones Preston, people have been doing this work long before me, people who are no longer here today. And so when I get exhausted, when I get tired of teaching white people, when I come across people of color who think they don't have work to do, when things go sideways, when I make mistakes, when I feel like quitting, I think about the people that came before me. And then I think about my personal why, my children, my family. I still am worried about whether or not my family members will come home to me. I just, anyway, so that just gets me back up again in this work, because we still have a lot of work to do in this nation. And so that's what I want people to be really spending some time around, because this work isn't sexy. It's not easy. It's not something you just say, oh, I'm going to just start doing this. You really have to feel a deep commitment to want to stay the long haul for the change you want to see.
So much. So really, when we said the words, "Are you ready to leave a
Mhm.
legacy for the
Mhm.
next generation?" That almost sounds like hyperbole, right?
Mhm.
We've been
Mhm.
talking about this for decades. Why now? Why can it actually be different now? And I believe with all of my heart that it can be. So again, the visual, when we bring that visual up, right? It's showing
Mhm.
two books. And I'm literally saying right now that it is this day in time, this moment where we get to be a part of real change. So I'm going to bring this
Mhm.
up again. I'm going to have you drop the outside for me. So look at this. Look at the words. Are you ready to truly leave a legacy for the next generation? Are you ready to grow beyond the status quo? So we have some people on right now who said they just ordered your book. Christy, who's part of the Positive Intelligence DEI team, she was like, I love that. So she's in the chat right now chatting me. I love that I'm on with Capri. She has your book in her hand. She's like, it's the best thing that she's seen ever. Plain language, specifically designed to maintain the status quo. So my question to you is, as we talk about changing ourselves and really having a prescription to do that in positive intelligence, and you also building on that to truly change institutions, why now? Like, if you had to explain to someone what's going to be different about this now, what would you say?
Wow. So your question is, ask me your question again, Traci. What are you
So,
wondering?
so the reason I got super excited is because I believe the National Black MBA Association was founded 54 years ago, right? Focused on economic and intellectual empowerment. We've been talking about this for decades. We've been
Yeah.
talking about creating an inclusive culture. We've been talking about changing the status quo for decades. And I
Yes.
think a lot of the conversations have not required us to change as individuals. It has not
Mm.
made that the baseline for success. So
Yeah.
I'm saying right now, I think what makes this so different is we are the change we want to see. We can say the words, but now we have a specific and explicit process through positive intelligence that says this is how we change the
Yeah.
status quo. We bring in neuroscience, positive psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology, and performance science. So four sciences, right?
Yes.
And spiritual elements that allow us to say we actually have everything we need to change who we are. It's research based. It's guaranteed to work if we do the work, if we to change ourselves. And then
Yes.
you layered on top of that this deeper
Yes. I got you.
structural elements. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying is I'm super excited. How do we get other people excited? Why now? Why are those two things such a perfect combination?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been an always, right?
Mhm.
There's always been in our country a fight for equality and equity for people who have been marginalized. And so this isn't new. And I'm honored that you're like, oh, this is the best book. It's not the best book. It is a wonderful book and it is a great tool. And there are many tools out there. There are many great books out there to help us to grow. I What you're talking about is two things. One is my personal power to like direct my life, to be that change, to seek more than the generation before me.
Mhm.
And then there's also the institutional, right? So I can be my own barrier and the institution can be our barrier. And
Mm.
the challenge is that when you have privilege, you don't see that it's not as simple as, well, just think positively. That there's more to it. It's like, well, I can keep thinking positively, but if I keep getting pushed down and pushed down and pushed down, then pretty soon I begin to believe the things that society says about me. And that's a
Mm.
very difficult thing to overcome. So right now, Traci, like the way that our society is set up is, I believe that you and I, for example, and I don't know your story well enough, but we've succeeded in spite or despite the systems that are set up, right? So the things, the obstacles that we have overcome, racism, sexism, for me, classism, like those are not easy barriers if our systems, if our institutions, healthcare, education, the judicial system, if these things were also working in our favor, we would see more people who look like us doing some of the things that people who look like us are also doing. If that makes
It
sense. But
does.
right now we succeed despite those barriers, and that should not be that shouldn't be how our system is, particularly in a land that says, this is about anyone, America is a place, a land of opportunity.
Hmm.
It's a land of opportunity for some, and some of us have to work twice as hard. And so, what can we do in those institutions so that my desire and my efforts, my motivation actually takes me where it should, given the amount of effort that I'm putting into it. And that's just not the case right now.
I love that. I love that so much. One of the things I just heard you say, which is perfectly aligned, again, these two books, Positive Intelligence and Inside Out, they both talk about the inside job, the work that we need to do. And I heard you just say that oftentimes, we are our own worst enemies, right? There's some things that we need to do. We can create our own blocks. We call them saboteurs, right? The left side of the brain are the saboteurs, right? It's a part of our brains where all the negative emotions come from, the negative self-talk. And then on the right side of the brain is that thrival. We call it the sage voice, right? The sage perspective. So tell us a little bit about, because you were talking about even your book, some of the saboteurs that you hear and that you see show up for us, and
Mm.
what can be done about them.
You know, that's a great question. So the first thing that comes to mind is when I was working in a large school district, people who had been there before me much longer, they had experienced so much defeat that they kept
Mhm.
saying, "Oh, they'll never let us do that," or
Mhm.
"No, that we're not going to. They're not going to let us do that. That's not going to happen." Well, I came in kind of naive and green and kind of fresh and energized, and I'm like, "Well, let's give it a try." So I think those messages that get repeated over and over in our systems, in our workplaces, from our families, we begin to believe them. We begin to internalize the stereotypes that people have about us: light skin versus dark skin, tall men versus short men. And so those saboteurs can be the things that we internalize. So for me, I was a really shy person that was fearful of making mistakes. And I would never toot my own horn, so to speak. I would never speak highly of myself because I was so busy, like trying to prove to everyone that I didn't think I was better than them because of that light
Mhm.
skin, dark skin dynamic, as an example. And so it wasn't until I read Mariam Williamson's quote that around, like, I'm not serving God, right? That's one of my identities as a Christian, that me shrinking, me playing small doesn't
Mhm.
honor what he's done for me. It doesn't serve the world. It doesn't serve other people for me not to show my brilliance, and so I started slowly practicing saying, yes, I do look good today, don't I? Like, why would I get all dressed up, leave the house, look good, and then have somebody tell me you look good and say, oh, well, And so I started practicing doing that personally and professionally, knowing what that does for other people. So when you talk
Mm.
about saboteurs, like they can be small things and they can be big things. They can be a lifetime of hearing these messages around what we should or could or shouldn't do, and we follow those rules without even being aware of it. And so we're often holding ourselves back, right? So now sometimes I wake up and I say, I love me some Caprice today. Like I don't always that way, but just this practicing of like, I'm working really hard to be the best version of myself. I need to learn to love myself. And I came a long way. Never would have said something about myself like that. But I do believe in you're playing small or shrinking isn't serving anyone. So that's, I think, one example. And so then what was the other one you said? The sage, right? Those are the sages. And I had to do a lot of affirmations. So just even allow my voice to be heard. And I'm working on this in graduate school. I'm a grown woman. I do not have the voice that I have right now, right? Same tone, same deep voice. I used to tell myself, Traci, and I don't share this with many people, but I used to say, it's your world too. And whenever I wanted to speak, and I was so afraid of having my voice heard, somebody not liking me, making a mistake, getting it wrong, I would say that to myself to give myself the courage to say and share my thoughts, that I realized not everything I have to say is profound, but I realized I'm not gifting people what I have to offer by that shrinking. So affirmations, I think, for me, have been really helpful in countering those, what do you call, sabotage?
The saboteurs, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it. And again, I have multiple little certifications related to this concept of being a transformational coach. But what I love most about positive intelligence is the simplicity of the work. Like we could talk about factor analysis, right? Which is really when you go to the root cause of a problem. And what you just talked about, some people, they think about this is when you feel like you're not worthy, right? And so, when you're not actually living out your fullest potential in life, when your performance perhaps is not all that you said, the gifts that you have, you're not gifting them into the universe, the relationships that you have are not thriving. When those things are happening, that's what positive intelligence allows you to create a new you. Like you get to step into, we've all heard of IQ, we've heard of EQ for emotional intelligence. Positive intelligence is about PQ. It's that third element of you deciding that from a performance, a relationship, and a well-being perspective, I'm going to actually be able to step into all that I am. And you do get to, so the three things that you get to do, the simplicity is you get to intercept the saboteurs. We identify them first and we intercept the saboteurs. The second thing is we amplify the sage perspective, right? And we amplify, there's 5 sage superpowers, right? That you get to take into your new being. It's like, transformation is about that caterpillar that turns into a butterfly. So it's in doing this mental fitness work, you're not the same being. When you intercept the saboteurs, right, those voices in your head, and you create a space where you're amplifying your sage powers and that sage perspective, you literally are changing at a DNA level. That transformation, you can't go back, right? Because you're now a new person, a new being. And this is about being differently, not being different, not just doing. And I know you use that language as well. Let's talk about being and the importance of becoming.
Yeah. Well, I love to hear that. And, you introduced me to this idea of IP. Of course, as a clinician, I was trained on administering batteries of tests. And IQ was one of the things that we measured. And, it was apparent early on how biased those tests are. And how not only are they biased, and we can get into that, but my main point around that is we've used that IQs as a way to measure the haves and the have-nots in our society.
Mhm.
Who gets the best jobs, who gets into what colleges. We have the SATs and all these exams that measure in honesty. They really measure how much income you have, what's your
Mm.
socioeconomic status, so you can get the tutors that you need, so that you can go to the best schools. Like, class is often associated with who gets ahead, and then who's going to do better on those tests, right? Who's got the resources and the support. And now what we're finally starting to look at, and I love emotional intelligence, and I'm excited to learn more about
Positive
about
intelligence. Hmm.
huh?
PQ, positive intelligence. It's the positive intelligence quotient.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm
Yeah.
excited to learn more about that, because that speaks more to me. What kind of a person am I? What are my relationships like with other people? I know this, for at least for emotional intelligence, right?
Hmm.
I know how to work well with teams, right?
Hmm.
I wish I could remember this quote, but it's something around, like, you can get straight A's, IQ. I want to know, can you dance? Right? Like, not like, can we, how are we in relationship with one another?
Yes.
How do we work together? How do we show that we care about one another? And we need
Yes.
to place more value on our humanity and how we
Yes.
treat one another, rather than this, IQ, that performance measure, this measure that measures essentially how much have you memorized, how much education have you had,
Exactly.
did you receive, which we know is tied into, again, social economics. So it's not a
Hmm.
truth teller.
I love that so much. I love that your book is called Inside Out. I love that because, again, when you think about PQ, there's multiple assessments as a part of PQ. There's this saboteur assessment. So if you go to positiveintelligence.com, halfway down the page, you can find something that says discover your saboteurs. These are all free assessments online. So discover your saboteurs. There's also the PQ assessment, which allows you to see how much time is your brain working for you versus against you. This is about you. This is an inside out job, right? This is about how are you thinking differently, right? And so you get, and the beauty of it is you get to use mental fitness to create a different outcome, right? You get to create a new you.
I one of the things, I don't think I wrote about this in the book, but one of the things when I'm facilitating workshops, Tracy, that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get white people, and you got to watch my TEDx talk, because otherwise, when I say white people, some white people get triggered, like, like, not all white people are bad, right? Well, I'm not saying all Black people, I'm not saying all Asian people, all Indigenous people. I'm talking thematically or in general, but I'm trying to get white people to move from their heads to their hearts,
Mm,
because we intellectualize everything.
yes.
Uh, and I'm trying to get people of color to move from their hearts to their heads. And what I mean by that is, I want white people to really try to connect to the way in which our systems are set up and designed to oppress certain groups of people. And we talk about race, but I'm really talking about class and ability and
Mhm.
age and gender and all of this sort of thing. Whereas people of color, we internalize these messages that we have gotten, like, since before we were even born, have been passed down
Yes.
throughout generations around this sense of inferiority. So we're often working to kind of compete or be seen by white people in the way that makes them feel comfortable seeing us, or in the way that they value us the most,
Mm,
in the way that is their norm. And so I'm suggesting, and I think, what I'm learning about PQ and EQ is that, like, what if we created a new way of being in the world? What if we redefined what workplace culture looked like? What if we
exactly.
redefined what relationships look like? So, for example, we work really hard to create spaces where people can be vulnerable, where
Mhm.
leadership in workplace has often been this, like, let's keep personal and work separate. Well, I'm not separate from my workplace. And what that means for me as a person of color is leave yourself behind. And so
Mm.
how do we create these cultures? I'm not saying that people bring their entire self. I mean, there's some things I want to keep to myself, but the part that I love the most that I want to bring, like interrupting, like I get excited. You get excited. Why do we say that interrupting is rude or that it's not professional? Or I'll give you one more example. We're doing Zoom a whole lot more. What if my cat appears during this virtual, or my child comes in, grown woman, but home from college? Like, can I stop and say hello and say I see you and still be professional? But we've defined our culture in a way that says I have to leave my humanness behind. And I spent a lot of my children's young life growing up trying to separate them. And I realized, like, no, social justice starts at home. We're not separate from this work. So this is where I get excited about, right? Like,
I love that so much. You actually did that on our very first call. Someone came in and I gave him the hand. I was like, and you were like, it's okay. You like, this is what we do. And the people, and it immediately shifted in my head. I was like, oh my God, you're so right. You're so right. How many times do parents, I don't have children, but how do we shush others, right? Diminish them, put them in a second place when really the most important people are the people that we're shushing.
And it's why we're doing this work. So there's
why we're doing the work.
So there's this ingrained in us around what it means to be professional. So even as I speak that and I believe in it, I have to practice it. I have to practice it. I have to practice. I let everybody else bring, no, take care of it. Do what you need to do. That's okay. We can wait. Whatever it is, I have to work on giving myself that permission. Another is for me, when I think about what the little bit I understand of PQ and EQ and changing this culture is, how we like take care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We put more value in how many hours someone puts into a work day, that we will brag at the end of the year about how many vacation hours we have saved up. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how is that the model that we want to,
right.
So it's about like inside out. It's how are we taking care of ourselves? How are we, really trying to live our best lives beyond the little, flashes of that we might show, that we might put on a social media site, but really doing that work that lives into the beliefs that we hold. Easier said than done.
I love that so much. And when you talked about like changing the culture, what's exciting about what you've already built in your book, Inside Out, and what Positive Intelligence focuses on, it really is, again, the 3-factor analysis, right? You're minimizing your saboteurs, you're increasing your sage. And if the sage perspective, that's part of how we get to build a new culture, right? How we get to kind of create a new baseline understanding of what success looks like. So we get to decide that, oh, by the way, every situation can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. That's the sage perspective. And the beauty, I'm giving it all away for free, y'all. This is in the book, Positive Intelligence. There's 5 superpowers. And the 5 superpowers are not only how we change ourselves, how we increase our performance, how we improve our business, how we have better relationships, but it's also how you change the culture. It's you decide that these 5 things, and I'm going to give them to you real quick. Number 1 is this idea of empathy. And we do empathize better with ourselves, with others, with situations, right? So the 10 saboteurs, right, start with the judge. So if we're going to intercept the saboteurs, we also get, all the other saboteurs go away, right? In theory. Imagine that they're never going to go away, right? We say intercept the saboteurs. It's how much time are you going to let that negative thing show up? It's about putting your hand on the hot stove. Whoops, I see you, and not today. I'm going over here to my sage, right? So when you identify the saboteurs, you're just saying, hey, I see the judge, I see the hyperachiever, I see the controller, I see the pleaser, I see the avoider, I see the hyper-rational. Go down the list, right? It could be any of those things, and that's what it helps you to do. You start with that. And then the superpowers, those 5 superpowers, if you know that you're going to continuously have to minimize your saboteurs, have to intercept the saboteurs, then the culture changes with the 5 elements. So we're going to talk about these, and I know you had something to say about each one, but we're going to talk about 5. Empathize. Empathy is step 1, and that's for you and for your culture, for your organizations. Number 2 is this idea of exploring. I just need more information. I'm not going to judge you, right? That's a saboteur that we're going to put to the side. I need more info. So you're like a curious anthropologist, right? So empathy, curious anthropologist, you're going to empathy, explore, then you're going to innovate. If you believe that truly the sage perspective is true, if you truly believe that every situation can be turned into a gift and an opportunity, then I want to explore, what are those gifts? What could they be? Right? Yes, and they're all true. All the things that could be my truth. That's number 3. You're going to explore and then innovate. I'm going to explore all the gifts that could be coming out of this situation. And number 4 is the concept of navigating. You and I talked before about this idea of us deciding what our core values are. Like, organizations all say what their core values are. How many times during these equity conversations do they ever go back to their core values? It's not part of the process. It's separate. Shenanigans happens over here. Our culture is over here. No, the shenanigans are the culture. And if the shenanigans that happens within an organization leads to a negative outcome to diverse individuals, and I don't care about race. It ain't just about race to me. That's important, but it's all the isms. If you're different in any way, this is about creating an inclusive culture for everyone to thrive. We all say that, but it's the 5 steps that allow you to do it. So it's the empathy, it's the explore, it's the innovate, right? And then it's navigating. Navigate back to, look forward to what you say is important to you. That's navigating. Navigate to the next week, the next month, the next year. At the end of your life, what do you want people to say about you? Coming back to that is critical. And the last one is activate. The last sage superpower is then you activate, and you activate from a place of clear focus and calm. That's what your PQ reps, that's what this process allows you to do. But if we can just begin to think differently, using some undoing, right? So using some of the language and the steps that are in the book Inside Out, but you have to change from the inside out yourself. We can't change systems without changing ourselves. So positive intelligence is the deep, deep, deep dive on how you truly change yourself. What are your thoughts about the concept of changing the culture by really leaning into those sage powers that we all have?
When I hear these 5 things, so I think about empathy. So again, my company focuses on race, right?
Yes.
And I'm working personally to address my bias, my microaggressions, my privilege as it relates to all types of isms, and advocate wherever I can. So that's in my heart. And what I do professionally is around race. And I think about empathy. When I said helping white people move from their heads to their hearts, that's about the empathy. Listening to stories, understanding people's experiences, that being white in this world means something very different from being indigenous, from being Latina, or from being Asian or Black. Like, there's a different experience. And so how can you connect and begin to understand some of those experiences? And because they're not yours, that doesn't make them any less real for the people who experience racism. When you talk about exploring, this is where we talk about becoming genuinely curious, right? Learning as much as you can about other people's experiences. So even though I identify, as Black, I have to learn about the Asian experience in this country. And even when I say the Asian experience, that is so broad, right? Like, first generation immigrant, fourth generation, which ethnic group are we talking about? Learning as much as I can. And then innovating, I need to know more about what innovating and navigating and how those two things are different.
Sure.
But I do think about taking the risk to start to do things in ways that maybe you haven't done them before. Working collectively together to kind of talk about, like, whose interests are being served by the way that we've always done things, and what might try differently? And if that doesn't work, what can we learn from that? Risking making mistakes. I always tell people it's not if you're going to make mistakes, it's not if you're going to offend, it's when. Like we're
Yes.
trying things. So that's going to happen, right? But that's also for me where I learn the most.
Yes.
I think it might be the activate that is the activating the change. And so I need to learn more about
Yes.
innovating and navigating and how that ties into this work. I
Mhm.
was saying, I love this. I just keep learning from you every time I talk to you, Traci, is that in our country, and I don't know enough about other countries, but in our country, leadership is often defined as people with the answers, people with the
Mhm.
power, people with the know. And culturally responsive leadership is it's centered a lot around humility. Saying I don't know and I'm not sure and let's figure it out together. It is modeling. It is, again, the trying new things. And that's a very hard thing to do because in some ways you have to give up some of your power, some of your knowing, some of your ego or your identity to lean in to this place of ambivalent. How do you say the
Mhm.
word?
Ambivalent.
Ambivalent.
Yes.
Because I feel a lot better when I'm talking about things I know.
Right.
And this work invites us in to lean into the places that we don't know.
Mm.
And then work together with that knowing, toward what we know collectively together, moving towards, something different, something better. And so it
Mm.
really is a shift from the individual to the collective because racism is you're not gonna undo racism because you have a diversity director. You're not gonna have undo racism because you have 20% of people of color working in your company, right? Like it is about doing the work and
Mm.
developing that equity lens. And
Right.
I think, it starts with empathy and exploring and all of that.
It's,
Mhm.
it's a beautiful thing. You know what? You've graciously agreed to do several conversations with us. So we don't have any slides. We're just talking today. We wanted to drop some nuggets for people to really get excited about where we're going. If you're one of those companies, and again, we talked about the Washington Employers for Racial Equity. They reached out to me as president of the National Black MBA Association when I was president. I'm thrilled to not be right now. But when they reached out to me, they were like, "Oh, we love all the work you're doing to elevate our voices. We want you to help us tell our story, to help us to elevate." Well, now that's exactly what we're doing. They needed to get a year under their belt of measures, and they're literally 4 years into 3 years into a 4 year commitment or 4 years into a 5 year commitment. They committed $2 billion over 5 years, and 2024 is year four. So I'm actually leading what I'm calling a $1 billion community activation to create a space for those organizations. And you all know who you are. So we invite you to come tell your story about what have you done to truly increase the status quo. What have you done to truly, change the status quo to create that inclusive culture? What are the things you've done to support Black businesses and youth and professional development and more leaders? You have all these declarations on the WEIR website, Washington Employers for Racial Equity. And so we're like, we're excited to help you get there. And I just wanted to clarify that Miss Caprice Hollins and this book, Inside Out, as well as Positive Intelligence, right? And there's more work. I call it transformational inclusive leadership. But there are solutions. We don't have to stay where we were. We're committed to moving beyond the status quo. We're committed to turning these courageous conversations into intentional activation. So just get ready, get ready. We invite you on this journey. There's very clear roadmaps, and there's a path for you to change, as an individual, each of your leaders to change, for individuals in your organization to change. And that's how you're going to change the system.
Right, right. And there are so many resources. And like, I think about all the different folks out there that are doing
Yes.
DEIB consulting, right?
Yes.
You don't have to do it alone. And thank you
Yes.
so much, Traci. And I saw in chat there were a couple folks who says everybody loves Caprice, which I love because Caprice loves everybody. She doesn't like everybody, but she loves everybody for the
I
most
love
part.
it.
And so
So
that just warms my heart. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Oh,
wait,
there's
so I just brought on Bernard Walker. He is actually our founding president for the Seattle chapter of the National Black MBA Association. So he knows this organization was founded based on this idea of changing the status quo. So Bernard, tell us a little bit about why is it so important that we do this work, focus on changing ourselves so that we truly can change the status quo, so we can change what's happening in these companies.
Well, our struggle has been going on for hundreds of years. And Dr. Hollins is right on point about that we are just standing on the shoulders, um, um, being pushed up by people who have preceded us. I mean, for instance, Gandhi would say, be the change that you seek. Um, if we use scripture, Jesus is known for lift up the cross, right? So Frederick Douglass has said that um, without struggle there is no progress. So um, we are just continuing that struggle, and I think that what I want to add is that when you talk about the Washington Employers for Racial Equity, I mean, part of it is having that conversation um, and hearing what they have to say. But it is the four C's: this collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, um, um, and communication, in which we get together and innovate the solutions. It's not just about them telling us and we being passive receivers of whatever it is their agenda. It is um, us working out together um, the various levels of engagement, right? As full partners in the creating of an equitable ecosystem. So, so this conversation is great, but so there are many touch points in the greater Washington State community, and specifically the Seattle Tacoma community, where we can identify the outcomes we need because we live them every day. Um, and, um, and, and make sure that we see key performance indicators that are meaningful to us, that we can give active, interactive feedback on how to improve high school or college outcomes and jobs. And I'll stop right there because I can go on and on and on. But I'm glad to hear this discussion take place, and I'm glad to participate in it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bernard. I was just thinking about, like, you emphasized this has been going on for generations. And my nephew lives with us, and he works for a major airline. And he, like, such a hard worker, like, immediately got here, got this great job. And he asked me the other day, can I talk with you? And he said, he's telling me about these experiences he's having at work. He's like 28 years old. And he said, we're in a meeting. I'm the only Black person in there. Everybody else is white. And the person leading the meeting, he's a lead, goes around and speaks and names every person in the room, says something about them, says something to them, and never once speaks to him. And this conversation around like what can businesses do? Like this is where I get frustrated. This is where I get angry. I'm like, what do you mean what can you do? There are big things you can do, but one of the things you can do is see us. Like, why do we even need to form a national black, MBA
NBA associate, yeah.
Like we have to keep finding these ways to be seen, not because a way is being made for us, but because we have to make a way. And when you talked about this collaboration and not doing things for us, like we're not asking for a handout. We're not asking you to do things for us. We're saying, can you see that we are brilliant? Can you see that we are intelligent? Can you see that our degrees mean something, that our efforts, that our hard work means something? And then give us credit for that. Instead, we have these obstacles that we have to keep overcoming. And it just hurts my heart to see, yep, here it is. And I'm saying, talk to your uncle because, again, I want him to move it from his heart to his head. This is not you. This is what our systems do to us, cause us at a very early age to believe that there must be something that I'm doing wrong. And what we're asking for our organization to do is to question, what are you doing wrong? What could you do differently? Whose interests are being served by the way that you do things? And so Traci, I'm sorry. I just get
honey, you better preach. This is the amen corner moment right here. Listen, I love it. This is the absolute, this is my why. Like my company is called It's All Bigger Than Me Consulting. But before I started the consulting company, I started It's All Bigger Than Me Ministry because God gave me the vision of these bigger than me moments. When something happens, like what happened with your son, with your nephew, that's a bigger than me moment. It's a moment where you get to pause as an organization. That's what positive intelligence teaches us, about the pause. But then the decisions and the discussions that you need to have in those moments that are bigger than him, it really has nothing to do with him. It has to do with us. Like you said, see us. This is how you activate differently. So it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a Black person, an Asian person, that if you want to truly create an inclusive culture where everyone thrives, that bigger than me moment, you get to pause and acknowledge this is not how we should activate. This is not it. This is what should have happened in that place. And that's what I loved about your book. You have so many, this is what should be happening. So no one can come back and say, I didn't know. You lay out very specific examples in this book that these are my bigger than me moments. When this happens, this is what should be happening. And so that's why I'm so confident that right now we're in a position where we really can change the status quo. We're changing individuals through positive intelligence. You've laid out, here's what success looks like. And if organizations are willing to do some deeper work, like I said, it's just one example of calling it a bigger than me moment because it's like a pause. You and everybody in that organization needs to think differently about what truly is happening in your organization. Most CEOs know exactly what they want to say about equity and inclusion, but the experience that you just described is what culture produces. So now we're changing culture. That's how we change the culture. So it's actually easy in my head. We just got to do the work. We just got to show up and get people to do the work, right? Showing up differently is everything. It's everything.
Yeah, most definitely.
And if we believe that change is possible, you talk a lot about believing that change is possible. You mentioned, Caprice, that a lot of times we have people that are talking about what happened in the past and it doesn't seem possible because it hasn't happened yet. If we show up with a clear expectation around what success looks like, believing that it's possible, we truly can be the change we want to see. And that's what this initiative is about. That's what the Better Together Empowerment Series, the Living Powerfully experience is about. And that's why I'm so excited to bring Inside Out and Positive Intelligence together to truly lay out for, this isn't for everyone. This is just for leaders who truly want to change. This is for leaders who truly are ready to transform. And that's not everyone. Would you agree with that? Everyone's not ready.
Yeah. And I would just, I would, and Bernard, you've been waiting to say something. Please come in.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different things. I mean, one is that one of my favorite authors is Napoleon Hill. And in his Think and Grow Rich, one of the statements is that we need to have a definite plan for change, right? And that is important once you identify the what it is that needs to change, beginning with ourselves, that we begin at once, even if you think you're not ready, right?
Mm.
You don't get a way out,
Mhm.
because any excuse, right, can prevent a person from standing in their power, right,
Mm.
and seizing the opportunity. And so, I mean, there are many accolades that are given to Dr. King for the dream, right? I really argue that it's great that he had the dream, right? Um, of we shall overcome. We really are that overcoming power generation living now, right?
Mhm.
Carter G. Woodson talks almost 100 years ago, wrote The Miseducation of the Negro, in which he talks about when you control a person's mind, right, and how to think, right,
Mhm.
you won't um, have to tell a person to go to the back door because they believe they don't deserve to enter the front door. And they, in fact, will go and create a back door where there is not. And
Mm.
so the work that you're talking about is about our believing, beliving these positive thoughts and actions and words and deeds that produce this better place that we say we want.
Yes.
Yeah, I so appreciate that because I was kind of pausing on that, like, am I ready? And when I think about the power of oppression and what that does to our minds, I may have internalized that I'm not ready, I'm not worthy, I'm not capable. For me, it was I'm not smart enough. And so the idea of this, positive intelligence, and again, I don't know enough about it, but it sounds like it will help people with kind of working through some of those things that cause them to get in the way of discovering their own genius, discovering their own beauty, their own brilliance, and all of those types of things. Because again, like so many of us, we are making it in spite of the systems, and that just cannot continue to exist for us to make any real, progress. Like it's not enough. And so this is another way that it sounds like another way that we can counter the narratives that have been put out there about us because of some identity that we hold. And for me, that's very appealing. And I loved what you said earlier, Traci. Like those saboteurs are still in me. I've learned to recognize when they come up. I've learned to quiet the voice. I learned to kind of realize, ooh, you've been sitting in that saboteur voice. It's time to, I didn't have this language, but I love it. But it's time to do some sage thinking, right? But it's still, oppression is so powerful that my doctorate degree, my books, my TEDx, my business, all of these things, they might show you the shiny parts of me, but there are a lot of ways in which I still question, for example, my own intelligence, right? Because of all the ways in which it is messaged in society that people who look like me are not smart and are not, and I would say my education and these opportunities that I've kind of like, these winning moments, so to speak, these shiny moments have helped me to develop my sense of self.
Yes.
But even with all of that, so imagine the people that don't have that education, that don't have those stepping stones that they can say, okay, well, if I did that, okay, maybe I can do this. And if I do this, then maybe I can do this other thing. And I do believe that it does start with our thinking. And the
Mhm.
partnering is that we can't put the full burden on ourselves because it's more than even just our thinking. There's also very real systems out there at play that are holding us back, right?
Yes.
That are keeping us. One example I'll give is promotions. We keep being given, well, another thing that we need to do before we can be the ones that get that, that leadership position. Well, you need to do this and then do this. And then all the while people are coming along that we're training, that we've been there longer, right? And there's just
Always getting ready.
yeah, always getting ready. Oh, I love that, Bernard, right? Always getting ready. And that's real. So I may want to be a leader. I may want to step into that leadership position, and those systems are there. But let's get people to that point so we also know where to fight the systems. I got lots of examples, real life examples, those ceilings, those barriers that have been created. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love that so much. We could keep talking, but what I wanted to do is to transition to the next step in this process. So we are taking right now the National Black MBA won. Again, we won one of the grants through the King County, through the Gathering Collaborative, called Racism as a Public Health Crisis. And so we get the honor of bringing both positive intelligence into community, right? And we're celebrating the fact that we're changing leaders. We're changing who we are because we know that we can change the system. So if you are interested in being part of this transformation where we are truly going to be leaving a legacy, where you're ready to grow into changing the status quo, then we invite you to join us on this journey. And again, we got a guidebook, y'all. If you don't have this book already, it's called Inside Out. Inside Out, the Equity Leader's Guide to Undoing Institutional Racism. Dr. Caprice, I am so honored to have you on this journey. Y'all, we didn't even crack. There's so much in this book. We said we were just going to talk today. So I'm going to bring her back and we're going to go deeper. There's so much value in this book. So get the book, get the book. So the next time we're meeting next week, so order it immediately. How do they order it, Dr. Caprice? I think I saw it here.
You think I'd be ready for this? Well, one, I want to say, join my mailing list. So my company is Cultures Connecting. So you can just go to culturesconnecting.com and then you can learn about things that we're doing and all of that. Just Google Inside Out and my name. Unfortunately, there's a Disney movie that came out first. I didn't think that one through, Bernard.
Well, that's a great. Have you seen the Disney movie?
I don't know if I've seen it or not, but
conceptually, I love the fact that they both have the same name because conceptually, Positive Intelligence is the Disney movie, right? Yeah. The elements about those saboteurs, those voices, the good ones, the sage voices, they're all having it. You are the change you want to see. It is an inside out job. So I love the fact that there's a book called Inside Out. It just amplifies what you did here and this amazing resource for us. So I could not be more excited. Honestly, this has been wonderful. More.
So they can go on anywhere. Just Google New Society Publisher, Amazon, any bookstore. You can find it all over. Thank you.
And how do people reach you? I think your website is
culturesconnecting.com. And I guess I have to connect to YouTube to be able to put it in chat. culturesconnecting.com.
I love it. Culturesconnecting.com. Looks like Paul Jackson put it in the chat. The first thing he put www.culturesconnecting.com/inside out. So apparently he put the link. He's like, I'm boycotting Amazon. Order directly from Dr. Caprice.
Right, there we go. Yeah, and the holidays are coming up. Where are we going to shop, y'all? Right? There's a company called Intentionalists, and they've created this whole directory of any kind of business, anything you want to buy, services that by minority owned businesses, right? So we can be thoughtful, intentional about where we shop, the gifts that we give, to lift our communities up. That's another thing that we can do to counter that narrative. Companies, when they're ordering lunches and meals, they could they don't have to do some of the typical, Jimmy John's or wherever they order their meals from, right? There's a lot of amazing entrepreneurs out there doing their thing.
I love it.
So, Yeah.
I love it. The intentional I love it. So we're going to be intentional. That's what positive intelligence is all about. That's what Inside Out is all about. So we are changing the status quo. So we're taking about 50 people through a process. And I show up every Monday on Rainier Avenue Radio for free. Basically, we're saying we're putting the information into community. And we're going to be talking to Miss Caprice Hollins about the tools that are in this book and really what you can each do to undo institutional racism, y'all. This is about truly changing who you are. But just know it is about changing who you are. But for me and for Dr. Caprice, we are completely committed and we 100% believe with all of our hearts that now is our time for truly changing the status quo, right? To doing the work, creating an inclusive culture in your organization. Now is the time. Just commit to doing the work, y'all. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Thank you, Dr. Caprice. Thank you,
Bye.
Bernard.
Appreciate you.
Amazing. More to come.